take 2 minutes, and your opinion will really help us to improve our future webinars. And now I would like to give the floor to the co-coordinator of the UNICA Scholarly Communication Working Group, Andreas Degkwitz. He is Chief Librarian of Humboldt-Universität of Berlin, and he will moderate the upcoming session. Thank you very much, and the floor is yours, Andreas.
Thank you, Laura. This is very kind introduction of my person. I will say thank you very much to the UNICA office for all the preparations for this webinar, which deals with a very important topic, the transformation agreements, which we have in many European countries, but also in US and other parts of this world. It's a new kind of transformation to open access, and I think we need more and more information about the organization, about the costs, about the impact, and about the meaning of transformation agreements. We have a very interesting speakers for this webinar, and I thank Raúl for his hospitality that this webinar can take place in your university library. Thank you very much. We have 3 sessions. First, transformative agreements, perspectives from different countries, and these are 3 countries. Then we have one talk about impact of transformation agreements, and last we have meaning of transformative agreements in the 21st century literacies. So we start with the first session, transformation agreements, perspectives from different countries. Please ask your question in the chat, and after the session, we will pick up these chats and ask the speakers these questions. The first speaker we have is Theo Andrew, Scholarly Communications Manager of the University of Edinburgh. He will give us an overview of the situation in the United Kingdom, which is very important because, as he wrote us, in the United Kingdom, all the open access activities are funded by big players like, just a minute, Wellcome Trust and UKBsis. And this is, of course, very important, how the costs can be covered by funding and how the costs can be covered by the institutions, and in the institutions by the researchers or by the libraries. Theo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So as I said, my name is Theo Andrew. I'm the Scholarly Communications Manager at the University of Edinburgh. So my talk today, I've got 10 minutes to talk to you about the perspective in the United Kingdom. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background about the University of Edinburgh to put things in context. Then I'm going to introduce the open access landscape in the United Kingdom and kind of illustrate the role of funders and how critical they are. Next, I'm going to move on to the role of JISC in national negotiations with publishers, and JISC is our national kind of consortium negotiators who take forward these transformative agreements. And then I'm going to move on to a case study at University of Edinburgh about how we actually implement these transformative agreements. Then I'll talk about some of the emerging issues that we have found going forwards. So University of Edinburgh is based right within the city centre of Edinburgh, and let me just point out our library is this big large building here. So we're right next to the town centre. There's the Edinburgh Castle, and we're really ingrained within the fabric of the city itself. We have a student population of 45,000 students. It's a fairly small undergraduate population, but it's a large postgraduate population with lots of research students. We're a very European city, very international as well. We have 44% of our students come from overseas, 10% from EU countries. So we see ourselves as very European and ingrained within the European community. We have a large staff population of 15,000, of about half of which are academic research and teaching staff. Around about a third of our staff are international. So, you know, we are outwards looking, very much like our city. We are the 6th oldest uni in continuous operation in the English-speaking world, because we were founded in 1583, and we're considered one of Scotland's 4 ancient universities. So we're fairly large size. In the UK, we're recently ranked 4th in the UK Research Excellence Framework for Research Power, putting us behind Cambridge, Oxford, and UCL. So you know, we carry out a lot of research, we do a lot of publications. Each year we have around about 7,000 journal articles and conference proceedings being published. So now you've kind of got a sense of the scale of Edinburgh. Let me talk about how we fit into the UK open access landscape. So we've had various open access repositories for about 20 years, and it's taken a while for these to become mainstream, really. And it's not until large research funders like Research England, the Scottish Funding Councils, and UKRI became interested in open access that we were really able to push repositories. So the landscape, as I mentioned, is driven by research funders, but it's supported very much by university libraries who are taking the lead in developing repository systems and transformative agreements on behalf of their researchers. Our initial challenge for open access really was prompted by the Research Excellence Framework, and this is where the main research funders in the UK required that all research that's going to be submitted for assessment had to be deposited in a repository within 3 months of the date of acceptance, and then made open access after 12 or 24 months. And this was implemented in 2018, and it's been going on for about 5 years now. And the response to this is that in the United Kingdom, we have high repository use. If we look at the Leiden rankings, 24 out of 25 of the institutions, if you look at the volume of open access content in repositories as a percentage, based in the United Kingdom. So you can say that a lot of researchers have repository systems that they use, and they're making their content open access, which is great. Now, the issue is that quite often a lot of this content is made open access after a 12 or 24-month embargo, depending on the publisher. Now, our current challenge is Plan S. And we have a number of our largest research funders have signed up to Plan S, and they have recently implemented and updated their open access policies to require immediate open access on publication. So any of our research councils, like the Medical Research Council or the Natural Environment Research Council, they require immediate open access. Now, the issue is that we can't do this through repositories unless we implement a rights retention strategy. However, this is slightly controversial. So our response in the UK mainly is to comply with these research funders by coming up and signing up to transformative agreements. And JISC estimate that around about 80% of funding that UKRI and the Wellcome Trust fund is covered by a transformative agreement. So this is going to be the main way going forwards in the UK that open access is achieved. So we're seeing a kind of subtle shift from repositories towards transformative agreements. I'm not going to say any value on that. My preference is for repositories. However, it is clear that transformative agreements are very important in this landscape. So I've mentioned JISC and their role in national negotiations. So, you know, who are they and what do they do? So JISC is an organisation that works with members and strategy groups to review and help develop their priorities for open access agreements. And they're involved in the consultation to work out these requirements. They're involved with the negotiations directly with publishers. They assist libraries with signing up to licenses and including payment and reporting in the future. So JISC, working with members like universities, have come up with a number of different requirements for transitional agreements. And the kind of core things that we're looking for, the core requirements, are that agreements must reduce costs overall. Agreements must be transitional and they must be temporary. And they must permit compliance with the funders' mandates like UKRI and the Wellcome Trust. The agreements must be transparent, and it must make any open access content be discoverable, and the agreements must support improvements in service and workflows for authors and administrators. So with these kind of key set of criteria, JISC work with the community, with universities, to approach publishers to come up with proposals for their transformative agreements. Once the proposal is delivered by a publisher, then we have negotiations, and these are sector-led and governed by the university's UK JISC Content Negotiation Strategy Group, which comprises senior management from universities like vice-chancellors. They also have a content expert group comprising of librarians who can help advise with the technical issues around various negotiations. So these negotiations are aligned very tightly with UKRI and Welcome Trust policy, and hopefully Plan S policy guidelines as well. So since 2017, JISC have approached around about 400 publishers to try and engage with them to make sure that they can comply with the research funders' open access policies. And of the 400 that have approached, only about 150 have kind of confirmed that they have compliant options. On the other hand, only 8 publishers are unable to reach agreement. So you know, there are some publishers who are willing to work with the community, and then some are just kind of stand off and don't engage at all. So each of the transformative agreements that are presented to libraries within the United Kingdom are presented through and via JISC, and they have this system called the JISC License Subscriptions Manager, which we can use to sign up. And so with this system live, libraries can go ahead and pick and choose which transformative agreements are available and they want to sign up. It's very different to the traditional process of subscriptions management and choosing which journals to subscribe to. And we've had to really redevelop our own content acquisition processes to bring them up to speed, to taking into account open access issues. So we had a little minor restructure about the processes, and we've created an operational group comprising the content acquisitions and access people within the library who traditionally deal with subscriptions, and we brought in board the scholarly communications team, which is my team who deal with open access. And we brought these professionals together to really look at the criteria and evaluate the transitional agreements that are presented to us. We have a journals deals oversight group, which is led by the library director and with head of departments from the library. And they kind of give us strategic guidance and steering about which deals that we should or should not be taking. So we present evidence to them about which deals are good, which deals are bad. And then we get sign off from that group and we can take them forward. So a large part of what we're having to do is to evaluate the various transitional agreements that get put in front of us. So we've developed a standard template that we can fairly assess each of these agreements, and I'll go through some of these kind of key criteria that we use. Once we've evaluated the various agreements and made the decision to go ahead, we then have to agree on a funding mix. So it's traditionally we'll use a materials budget to pay for subscriptions, and would use the various open access block grants from funders to pay for the open access. But we have to kind of weave these together to create one funding source. And this would depend upon the amount of funded content that is attributed to some of the research councils. So I mentioned evaluation, and what kind of criteria do we use to evaluate these transitional agreements? So on the read subscription side, we kind of look at the spending arrangements, we look at usage, cost per use. So typically cost per use is how much it is to download. We look to see if there's an increase, and we look for value for money on the read side of things. So these are very typical questions that subscription librarians tend to ask. And we've had to bring aboard our experience of open access to have a new set of criteria with which we evaluate these transitional agreements. So we look at the previous year's spend on article processing charges. We look to see whether there's caps on articles, whether the eligible article types are there. And so we have various kind of issues that we go through. And these slides will be shared with everyone after the session. So hopefully you can kind of have a look through those in greater detail if you're interested in this side of things. So once we get a deal signed up, we've evaluated it, we think it's good value for money, we go ahead and we pay for it, the deal becomes live, and we're currently signed up to around about 30 transitional agreements. And I've got a link on this slide which will be circulated to the various agreements that we have with publishers. And we have found that this has really shifted the way that we're engaging with our researchers. So traditionally, our previous help desk activity has shifted from article processing charges, processing invoices, that kind of thing. Now we're spending a lot more of our time helping authors navigate these quite complex transformative agreements, you know, which journals are in, which are out, timings. And so we have had to create a searchable list of journals for authors to discover which journals they're free to publish in. Currently, we have a list of around about 10,000 journals that are covered by transformative agreements that people are able to sign up to in Edinburgh. So we're finding it's really shifting the kind of conversations that we're having when we're talking directly to researchers. Now, moving on to the kind of final slide, I'm just talking about some of the emerging issues. So I want to kind of trumpet some of these ideas and let you know some of the issues that we're facing. And I'm just going to echo some of the concerns that our researchers have kind of told us about. And our researchers, particularly within arts, humanities, and social sciences, think that some of these read and publish deals are really reinforcing geographical inequities. So while the read and publish agreements are great for staff, they're generating these inequalities. And that's because journals from scholars in the North and European countries and America may be covered by these read and publish deals, so their work is open access. But articles from the global South generally remain gated. Now, publishers know this is a problem and are trying to find responses to this. So I'd really encourage universities to talk to publishers about these issues when signing up and renegotiating these agreements, and try to encourage them to respond creatively to these issues. And of course, this, is keeping with our objectives as a university, a creator and disseminator of knowledge. We're also finding that a number of these deals are challenging for early career researchers. So when we limit these deals to corresponding authors, it can have a really negative impact on those kind of postdocs and PhD students who maybe create their work at Edinburgh and then move on to another organisation who might not have a read and publish deal. So I'd really encourage universities to try and take a proactive and supportive role towards our early career colleagues who may be caught up in this situation and are prevented from publishing their work open access. We're also finding that these deals are changing authorship behaviour, which is kind of interesting. I don't want to talk too much about this, but we're finding people are kind of rearranging and thinking about differences who are corresponding authors, just to try and shoehorn themselves into and take advantage of these deals. And a very specific issue to the UK is that of value added tax, VAT. It's currently 0 rated for e-publishing, so journals, but VAT is applied to the publishing element of the read and publish split. So we're having to actually pay VAT upon these read and publish deals, which is kind of tricky given the current financial insecurities that we find ourselves in. And I kind of just want to finish up just saying, are we walking into a big deal version 2? These read and publishers deals really benefit the larger publishers, and it's difficult for the smaller publishers to experiment and engage. So that's our experience from the UK. I'm speaking from my perspective as a librarian at the University of Edinburgh, but hopefully I've managed to cover a lot of the things that we're thinking about in the UK. I'm going to hand you on to our next speaker. Questions, if you have any, can be answered in the chat and at the end of the first round of 3 speakers. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand over to Andreas. Andreas, you're muted.
Thank you, Theo. It's very interesting, and it is interesting to look at your model of transformation, subscriptions to open access. This might be different at the University of Edinburgh, comparing with Germany. and about Germany, Colleen Campbell will tell us something. She's member of the Max Planck Digital Library and is very deeply involved with the so-called DEAL project. And this is just a transformative agreement with big publishers. Just it is picking up your last point, Theo, because we have a lot of experiences with big deal transformative agreements, and it's completely different in some regards what we told you about your experiences with single journals or single publishers. Colin, the floor is yours. I'm very curious about your presentation about deal in Germany.
Right, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I actually found, I was really happy to see Theo's presentation because I find it quite complementary to what I'm going to present, complementary in the sense that a lot of what he has described are things that actually are common to libraries and library consortia around the world. So rather than repeating a lot of what he has said, which would be, because there is so much in common with what happens with some of what's happening in Germany, I'm actually going to focus on impacts. So what has this all meant for us so far? But I'm going to start with a brief snapshot of the situation of transformative agreements at my own institution, the Max Planck Digital Library. Then then a snapshot of transformative agreements in Germany. And then I will go through and just highlight some of the impacts that these are having. And then, of course, we can dig into details later. So let me move forward. Okay, at my own institution, the Open Access Transition Strategy of the Max Planck Society. MPDL, which is the central library of the society, we have been negotiating transformative agreements in their progressive iterations for some years now, and currently we have 23 agreements in place that we would call actual transformative agreements, meaning we are repurposing the subscription expenditure to support open access publishing instead. 23 transformative agreements with publishers that are subscription based. You can see those marked in the light orange. Then 10 agreements with fully open access publishers. Of course, those are in the darker orange. And that basically means that our authors, our researchers can publish openly in more than 10,000 journals today without having to pay APCs and in full compliance with Plan S. On the national scale in Germany, you have a similar sort of chart graphic. Over in the pink, you see transformative agreements in Germany, and this is as registered in the ESAC registry of transformative agreements. And the visualization is coming from the ESAC Market Watch, which you see the link at the bottom. You see, of course, the open access in Germany happening through fully OA journals, and then you see, of course, hybrid or closed access publishing that is happening. So we're around 50% right now in Germany. 31% of research articles are published openly now via transformative agreements, another 18% via fully OA journals. And then we have you can see here truly the impact of the nationwide deal agreements. So between Springer Nature and Wiley, which are the two agreements negotiated by the National Consortium Deal, just this year, or excuse me, in the past year that is now closed, we have around 28,000 articles enabled open access. Now, just a word about the deal negotiations. The objectives of the deal negotiations are stated as being enabling or giving German researchers the means and opportunity to publish their work openly. So it's open access publishing. At the same time, since we're still in a transition and a lot of content is still behind the paywall, the second objective was enabling equal access and permanent access to closed content with the publisher, journal content with the publishers we were negotiating with, and all of this done with a fair and transparent transitional cost model, something that would bring the community toward an open paradigm where what we pay for is actually the open access publishing services that publishers are providing through their journals. Now, moving on to what impact specifically the deal agreements. I'm going to talk about the deal agreements because, yeah, they are nationwide agreements, meaning they were negotiated on behalf of more than 900 institutions in Germany, of all sorts. The impact that these deal agreements have had, first of all, for researchers, for scholars and scientists. Theo described, the slow progress we had when we were relegating responsibility for open access to our authors. Scientists are very busy. We are actually trying to remove the friction for them to publish openly and eliminate author-facing APCs. We want to really deliver open access publishing options to them wherever they choose to publish. And the deal strategy, of course, was to start at least with the three largest publishers because that was the highest impact. So we're trying to remove the administrative burden from scholars and let them focus on doing their science. And in fact, both in this respect, the agreements have been an enormous success. More than 95% of authors, eligible authors, took advantage of this opportunity granted through the deal agreements to opt for an open license when publishing in a hybrid journal. Impact for global open science objectives. I think it's always important when thinking about the transformative agreement strategies is how this fits into the larger picture. Here in this wave, you see the number of articles that are enabled open access thanks to transformative agreements being negotiated around the world. There I've highlighted Germany very, very briefly. I think total there's some 86,000 new research articles published openly through transformative agreements in Germany. That is, helping to advance the community in achieving our open science objectives. The UNESCO new recommendations for open science talk about open access. They also talk about organizing budgets around openness. And so, yeah, this is one way we are working toward those recommendations. Now, how about increasing the reach and impact of German research? Here I've presented a snapshot that we've received from one of the publishers, Springer Nature. This is preliminary data, but just to give you an idea of what impact all of this German research being published openly has had, and that you can see an enormous increase. You have the different continents represented, enormous increase in interaction of users in different parts of the world of the articles published openly under the deal agreements. So obviously, obviously articles published immediately open access, it's going to reach so many more scientists around the world, which is only going to increase the impact of German research. Looking at impact from a different perspective, or excuse me, reading or access to content from another perspective, this graph, again, it's publisher provided data. We're looking at, you remember I mentioned one of the objectives of the nationwide deal agreements was to provide equal access to the full journal portfolios of the publishers across all of the institutions. And this has had an enormous effect in Germany of equalizing and researcher access across the country to peer-reviewed journals. Not only the open access content, but also the paywalled content that previously not every institution in Germany could afford to subscribe to. So the deal agreements have fully met that goal, and it's had enormous impact for researchers across Germany, from large institutions to teeny tiny research institutes. Now, so this is all that's all the good impact that we want from an open access mission. let's take a look at the finances, because inevitably the question of transitioning scholarly publishing to an open access paradigm, the cost somehow is also on our minds. I mean, when we think about the purpose of transformative agreements to begin with, it's not merely to push publishers to shift their business models and flip their journals to open access. It's actually, there's a dual purpose of transformative agreements. There is a purpose on the side of research institutions and libraries, and this was described by Theo actually in the parameters that he was showing, to reorganize how we, our business processes, our funding mechanisms, how we organize our budgets to prepare for a fully open paradigm, right? They are a transitional state, they're a bridge. Right now, we are all sort of facing the past in a subscription world, really rooted in the print era, and we're trying to turn around all of our financial streams, workflows, processes, how we interact with the different stakeholders to face an open future. So, looking at now, what, again, the impact from a financial perspective, we can see that overall, the deal agreements have generated overall cost savings for the country. And that we can see, this is a graphic taken from the cost modeling tool. I mean, most institutions, we started transformative agreements thinking about them just a few years ago, and libraries previously weren't really tracking what open access publishing was happening or their publishing profile of their researchers. So, we needed to get a handle on what was happening in terms of publishing in order to organize ourselves around that publishing. And so the lines that you see here are both trends based on data. You can the cost modeling tool, there's a discussion paper, you can read all about the modeling that was done, and it's an interactive tool actually. So looking at the cost developments of subscription fees, which continuously increase, and the costs of open access publishing, so APC expenditure, which might have been handled by authors alone, totally what that comes to, what is that costing the research community at large. And then we see now with the deal agreements, we are able to analyze how much is being paid for publishing and reading. And and we can see that the costs have been brought down. If we were looking at projecting based on the current trends, there's no doubt that the agreements have brought cost savings on a whole. Now the tricky part, we have to work through the transition. So this concept, this is global. While it's generally accepted that there is enough money in the subscription system overall, I mean, forget APCs in the wild, even in the subscription system, what is invested globally is more than enough to sustain open access publishing of the same scholarly journals. The money isn't always where it is needed. And so we are right now in this transition phase, thinking about what we used to pay for reading access might be very different from what we expect to pay in a fully open access paradigm in the future. So right now we are working through that transition in which we reorganize our investments. And this is really where we have the power of the consortium, because while we are demanding open access from publishers, on our side, on the library side, we need a little time to reorganize. And just to give you an idea of where the deal consortium is now, this is just a quote from a presentation given just a couple of weeks ago at the German Library Conference. What the deal consortium is now working on is indeed to try to find a fair balance in balancing those costs and moving the community to a cost model or framework where the institutions pay for the services they receive, which is open access publishing. And right now the consortium is the best place to help enable that gradual transition that is sustainable for all parties. Now, of course, I've got 2 more slides. I hope I'm not going over time. This transition, this shifting of financial streams and reorganizing our investments to support open publishing instead of paywalls. This is obviously on the minds of the higher level stakeholders in Germany, but around the world, of course. The German Science and Humanities Council just recently came out with recommendations on the transformation of academic publishing, and they outlined a specific role for libraries and future role, and that is libraries would be the best placed to handle central information budgets. So it's not just a subscription budget that we're thinking about. We need to start thinking in terms of information budgets. So what is the budget that is necessary for open dissemination of research? They've also put in recommendations for the institutions themselves, and that is working with the libraries and others to define the appropriate publishing opportunities and organizing the financial conditions to support the publishing opportunities for all authors. And of course, as we move into an open paradigm, we have always had research funders on one side who are investing in scholarly communication. We have research performing organizations investing in scholarly communication. What we are increasingly having is alignment between the two, and in Germany, in fact, helping the institutions through this transition. We have the DFG that has opened up a funding line that is, adding additional support to the institutions, especially those who need, who might have come from a lower subscription expenditure and who is projecting higher, and also are immediately finding in the new agreements higher costs because of their publishing output. So the DFG is collaborating and has this funding line open. And I expect that around the world, there will be more and more alignment, much as what's described in the UK by Theo, between these two organizations to make this transition sustainable. So I will stop there, and I thank you so much for the attention.
Thank you, Colleen. This is very interesting. I'm immediately involved in this deal project, as you know, and from that I would like to say it's a completely different situation than the situation in Edinburgh, where you have one university, he's dealing with publishers. Here we have 400 university libraries who are dealing with two of the biggest publishers in the world. So it's a completely different situation, and all the problems with the balance of subscriptions and publisher is a very big problem, because there are a few big universities who are paying the bill as publishers, and there are a large number of universities who don't publish as much as the big universities, and they are the winner of the game, and this is a problem.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, this actually happens in the UK, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, I know that in the UK, that, right. I mean, this is a very common situation around the world. And this is why I think that the consortia, are very powerful in helping us work through that and transition sustainably.
Yeah. Now we would like to hear something about the situation in Spain. Raúl is co-coordinator of the UNICA Scholarly Communication Working Group. He is my co-chair, and today he is a speaker, and he is head of the Librarian at Universidad Carlos III de Madrid, and he will tell us something about transformative agreements in Spain. Thank you, Raúl. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Andreas. Well, I think it's been an enriching session on transformative agreements, and I think the good news is that even though we are speaking about different perspectives from different countries, we are speaking in a complementary way. So I think my presentation will also complement the other perspectives. So let me share the screen. Okay. The first thing I want to mention is that that's something that is very important to understand what I'm going to present today. I'm not going to present the perspective of a single university or just a bundle of universities. I am presenting the results of of a workshop held in December last year. This workshop was organized by Reviun. Reviun is the Spanish University Libraries Network, also including the libraries in the Spanish Research Council. And in Reviun, we have different strategic lines according to the strategic plan. And line 1 was in charge of organizing this workshop. So in the end, what I'm going to present today is based on their work. So first of all, thank you to them for providing all this information and for organizing this really enriching workshop. Well, we are talking about 76 university libraries, both public and private, most of them public, and also the Spanish Research Council libraries. But we are not the ones who have been negotiating the transformative agreements. It's been CRUE. CRUE stands for the Conference of Spanish Presidents, University Presidents, and also the Spanish Research Council. So this is very important to understand what has been happening with the core publishers selected for the first transformative agreements. So some context to understand the situation in Spain. This is the trend in the last years in expenses in information resources. As you can see, the expenses have been increasing, of course. I guess this is the trend in all the universities. The electronic journals and the databases, and of course, the digital expenses have been increasing in a sustainable way. In the last years, we haven't seen many goings and ups and downs. But here we have information about the libraries and the big expenses, but the costs in UKBsis are not included here. So these are some kind of extra costs. Well, another interesting thing to be aware of is this trend on what's being published in open access. This is a report prepared by Reviun as well. The good news is that the last year, apparently, and well, our methodology has some limitations, so we cannot expect really perfect accuracy in the data, but apparently more than the half of the publications are now available in open access in Spain, which are very good news. And what we can see is that the gold open access is growing. As Colleen mentioned, this may seem that maybe in the near future, this will be the only way or the most important way. The bronze and the hybrid are, well, the hybrid is stable, the bronze is decreasing, and the green has decreased a little bit compared to gold open access. So now, what's happened with the transformative agreements? Well, the negotiation started in 2020. As I mentioned earlier, the mandate is under the Conference of the Spanish University Presidents. It was decided to focus on just 4 publishers, ACS, Elsevier, Springer, and Wiley, because together they more or less are the 42% or were the 42% of the total information resources expenses in Spain. So it was like, let's say, some kind of big pilot project. There was created a committee per each publisher, but the libraries were not there. So it was a high-profile negotiation committee with some representatives that, of course, I think they made the most of the experience accumulated by the libraries in the recent years, but the librarians were not present in these direct negotiations. The agreement started to be discussed in 2020, and the General Assembly of CRUE approved them in April last year. And there was a time that covered 2021 and 2024, with a single exception, which was Wiley. At that moment, only an agreement for 1 year was reached. So we can think that the first year was considered as a transition, and actually in our universities, the fiscal year comes from January to December. So in April, we couldn't change anything. We needed to still deal with the budget that we all had. So this first year was actually a transition, and some changes in the prices were going to be applied from 2022 to 2024. As a general rule, the goals were three: increasing contents in open access, of course, gradually evolving towards paying for publishing rather than for subscribing or for reading. And a very important goal of these negotiations were trying to keep expenses under control, at least at the national level. And this is very important because we have discovered some distortions regarding that. Well, I think I cannot put all the numbers. So I have removed them from these slides. Maybe it's not very elegant to put the figures here, but at least I think it's interesting to see the number of APCs covering Spanish publications in these agreements, and also the increase of the price. Because as I mentioned, one of the keys was to try to keep the expenses under control. So you can see that in these years, the increase is around from 1 or 4% in this publisher, or really stable in this one to 75%, or 150 to 3 in this publisher, or in this other publisher. In the first year, just 0.90%. In this year, in the current year, for 62%. What's going to happen in the upcoming years is something we still don't know, because there are still negotiations. So with these 4 publishers, we have this scenario of apparent control of the expenses. And beyond these transformative agreements reached at a national level with the Conference of Spanish University Presidents, there are many others individually negotiated by the universities, for instance, with Cambridge University Press, MDPI, IEEE, and so on. So there's life beyond the big transformative agreements, and maybe in the near future, all these transformative agreements will have some kind of national framework. At least I think we can hope that. Well, the costs are very easily calculated. Let's say we are inheriting the subscription model and trying to put a new variable in the equation, which is the potential number of articles that are going to be published. But in the end, this means that the more productive you are, the higher your price. So when we think of the prices evolving across these 4 years, and we are thinking of trying to keep costs steady, in the end, this is only at a national level, because when the prices start to be rearranged, some things happen. For instance, there may be universities paying for, in a single publisher, more than 100,000 euros in a year. From the previous year to the second one, a 100,000 euros increase. Or another different university, these are just examples, can decrease the invoice in a very similar amount, which makes the situation quite difficult for some universities to deal with new situations where the budgets very infrequently rise or decrease significantly. So what are the main conclusions that there were discussed in this workshop we held in December? Some conclusions at the national level. Well, the negotiations have been held in a really high political level. So the university libraries think we can still play a role and we can offer added value because we are experts in negotiation with the publishers. The scope of the agreements nowadays is quite reduced, even though, as you already saw, we are covering more or less the 40% of the expenses. There are many other ongoing agreements, and in the end, there should be some kind of national framework. The usage of APCs is quite under discussion because sometimes they are not enough, sometimes they are too much, and sometimes they are wasted. And few publishers have shown flexibility, which for us is something really frustrating. The researchers have had a good reception, but in the first year, this is the truth, not many of them were aware of what we were doing at the universities. Some of them didn't know that there were transformative agreements, and they continued paying APCs in hybrid journals. So this has started to change, and I think this year and the next years, this will be more reasonably managed. So not that many APCs will be wasted. As for the costs, there's an increase of contents in open access, but the invoices continue growing, even in a controlled way. But from my personal point of view, we know the prices for the next 2 years, but what will happen the next year in 2025, given the increase in the inflation. So this is something that will be concerning us in the following couple of years. And a very important point is that the most productive institutions need to pay more because they publish more. So this is something in some sense logical, but this introduces some distortions in the system. And as for management or procedures perspective, we are loosening the criteria to provide the APCs. At the beginning, we were very strict, and this is one of the reasons, maybe because of this waste of the APCs. And there's some things in our relationships with the publishers, with interaction with them, and also with the using of the users, for instance, of the dashboards that may be improved. So hopefully we will also help build the system with new improvements in the following following years. So that's it, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Raúl. This is interesting. Again, a little bit different model from the other models that we heard about. Now we have the opportunity to ask questions. I have a question to Theo, and my question is, Theo, do you negotiate immediately with the publishers, or is this done by JISC, by a consortia?
Yeah, so JISC take the main lead on talking to the publishers. And they're guided by the content expert group, which consists of librarians. So we kind of pass on our requirements to JISC, and then JISC act as the negotiators directly with publishers. So it's kind of similar to Project Deal in other countries, but it's our own spin on it. So JISC are kind of the key communicators directly with the publishers. It has its pros and cons. A bit like Chinese whispers, where we kind of say to JISC, this is what we want. Something may get lost down the line, but so far it seems to be working quite well. JISC are representing what we, the universities, want from publishers.
And you have your own group in your university who is monitoring the activities of JISC.
So we have a journal deals group, kind of informally named, and that consists of the kind of practitioners, so the scholarly communications team and the journals. And we kind of make sure that the University of Edinburgh's requirements are articulated clearly to JISC, and make sure. So it's a very difficult job for JISC to make sure that they represent all of our universities correctly, because all universities are different shapes and sizes, and one kind of recurring theme that's coming up through each of these three talks is that the larger research institutions are going to be paying more, and the smaller institutions are going to be paying less because they're publishing less. And there's this kind of tension that with every proposal that gets put to the publishers, some are happy and some are not happy. So it's difficult, and I'm sure that other countries are finding a similar position.
Okay, so it's no difference between United Kingdom and Germany. Colleen, I misunderstood that as Theo reported about it. I focused this group in University of Edinburgh, and I thought that they are deciding what is contracted and what is not contracted. So, but it seems to be some kind of advisory board for the university. That's right. What you will do and what you will not do.
So yeah, we take forward our requirements and we present it to the national negotiators, JISC, who then interface with the publishers.
Yeah.
So it's very similar to other countries.
Yeah. You told something about the block grant in the chat, and it would be helpful that you would tell us a little bit more to the entire group what this block grant is.
Of course, yes. So the main research funders in the United Kingdom comprise of the research councils, and they're kind of known as UKRI. So if you hear that, UKRI, it just means the research councils. In conjunction with the Wellcome Trust and some other charitable organisations like Cancer Research UK and the British Heart Foundation. So they provide, they reacted to Plan S and signed up to the Plan S guiding principles, and they introduced new open access policies, and to support the implementation of those policies at universities, they provide block grants to the institutions to enable them to cover article processing charges. Now, the amount that is awarded to institutions is kind of determined by an algorithm, and it's a bit opaque. We don't know exactly why different institutions get the funding, but it's loosely based on the size of the institution, i.e. how many research outputs are they producing, what funding are they receiving from these research councils. So the idea is that the universities are able to help their authors to comply with the open access policies of the funders. So rather than the block grants being sliced up and given to individual authors to kind of go ahead and pay for individual papers, the money was given to libraries to be able to administer. And this is kind of, with a bit of foresight, you know, that's really helpful for us when trying to come up with these transformative agreements. So at the beginning, there was a lot of discussion about how these block grants were going to be given to institutions, but the libraries were able to argue, hey, we're in this space, we have a kind of a central view on scholarly communication and publishing, and we can make sure that the investment from research councils is best used to get the maximum amounts of value for money and cost reductions. Saying that, we do have researchers who pay for article processing charges in the wild. We don't know, you know, they may pay with their credit cards. We just don't know what they get up to. But hopefully, you know, the libraries are in a good position to see what's going on. So to give it in context, I think UKRI, the research councils, invested about £50 million last year for universities to spend on open access publishing. Now, it's unrestricted spending, and the intention is that it's there to support and to pay for article processing charges, but there's a lot of overheads and administration on that. So we use our block grant to pay for some staff expenses for someone to actually administer and to man a help desk to help people with walk their way through these transformative agreements. We also try to experiment a bit with the funding and use it to support other initiatives like Subscribe to Open and other you know, diamond open access infrastructure. So we don't know what the correct answer is. You know, we don't know the best way of making sure our researchers do open access. So we try everything. We try repositories, transformative agreements, diamond open access.
Okay, thank you, Theo. We have to continue our webinar, and we have the opportunity to ask some more questions in the end of this webinar after the next two talks. I would like to welcome Arjan Schalken. Yes, hello. You are program manager at the KNB of the Netherlands. That's right.
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. And you are a member of the network of Dutch universities, libraries, and the Koninklijke Bibliotheek.
Yeah.
You will talk about the impact of transformative agreements. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you for the kind introduction. Yes, I'm program manager for the Dutch consortium, and I would like to reflect on publication practices and open access as a driver of change, maybe, and the position of transformative agreements within that. Already in 2018 and before that in Netherlands, there was a firm statement about open access, and that every publication that was partly or fully publicly funded should be open access by 2020. Well, we didn't reach that, but if you see it at the right, there's a statement from Twente, a recent policy, and it says in 2023 open access is the norm, and so we are working towards that from all universities. We do that with several strategies. Since 2015, read and publish deals, now transformative deals, are in place, and we're one of the front runners on that. At the same time, in 2019, we started developing a strong green open access policy based on national law that is also implemented by all universities, and almost all universities have their own institutional full OA funds and institutional deals in place. When you look back, a little more back to the last decade and the trends within the publication landscape, you see an increasing amount of overall output. Looking at that overall output, the amount of gold and hybrid OA, it follows a steeper curve. Because research is becoming more and more international, the percentage of articles that have a Dutch corresponding author is decreasing slightly, let's say 1% each year. It's now around 49% of all publications university is participating in has a Dutch corresponding author. That has some impact, of course, on the usage of the coverage of a transformative deal, because that is only related to the corresponding authors. So the less corresponding authors you have, the more you have to use, for example, green OA to share work. Hybrid OA is the dominant factor. It increases more than all other other sorts of open access. And if you look at the field of the publishers, then the big traditional publishers in the last decade maintained their position. There are some large open access publishers gaining market share, and overall the top 20 publishing houses increase their market share. So you can look at it on full OA versus hybrid versus closed access, traditional publishers versus new publishers, but a big versus small seems to be the dominant factor when it comes to market share. The big publishers, regardless if they are more traditional or full OA, become bigger, and the small are more under pressure. Now looking a bit closer to last year, these are two university reports. The left is from Delft, and if you look at their open access numbers, it's rather impressive. I think Delft now has 85% of all the publications, so corresponding and co-author, are in open access. Wageningen at the right have a total of 80% of their publications are in open access. If they look at focus on the corresponding author publications, it's 92% of all publications are in open access. We're now still working on the national numbers for 2021, but if you look at 2020, then you see the gold OA, the DOIA journals, 25%, open access, covered 25% of the total, hybrid 35%, and green 13%, combining a total of 73% of all articles are open access. So that is corresponding and co-author. You could say that gold stays behind to hybrid, but you can also look at it in the percentage increase, and from 2019 to 2020, gold OA increases with around 20%, and also hybrid increases with around 20%. So there you see that although we invest heavily in hybrid open access and transformative deals, also gold OA increases. Green doesn't increase that much, but that is related to the fact that green is the strategy used for the articles that are published closed access. So 12% in 2019 covers 1/4 of all the publications that are not immediately open access. 13% in 2020 covers 1/3 of all publications that is published in subscription. So, and if you look at Delft, they are already at 60% of all articles that were published closed access in 2021 are already open in their repository in mid 2022. So There's a lot of work being done there. If you then see the increase of hybrid OA, that was also mentioned in one of my previous slides, the conclusion is that it's not dependent on author behavior. Our authors don't need to look at hybrid journals that are part of the deal. We have more and more hybrid journals in the deal. So at the left, you see the increase of amount of articles published as part of a transformative agreement. On the right, you see the number of Elsevier journals that are part of the deal. In our first years, we had a 10, 20, 30% of journals that part of the deal. In our last deal from 2020, 95% of all journals are part of the deal. And so that is the reason behind the increase in 2020 and 2021. It's the fact that more and more of the existing hybrid journals are part of a transformative deal in the Netherlands. Okay, looking at transformative agreements on publication practice. So it's not that the author looks at a journal and then decides, well, I'm going to publish with another publisher or another journal. But it's more about it's easier to publish open access. There's a lot of journals that are part of the deal, and you don't have to pay for yourself. The second thing is that we can manage more actively the quality of the service. So it's not only the author who sees the service, but also the consortium, and we can monitor it and discuss with publishers how it can be improved. We can also monitor compliant publishing. So for Plan S, if the right license is used, if it's open access. So also there we can help the author in his publication behavior. And overall, we monitor the use license, and with publishers who, regardless if it's Plan S or not, we see that there is a more restrictive usage of licenses, so CC by NC or CC by NC and D. We talk with the publishers and look at the workflow, look at the communication, and try there to increase openness. In the chart at the left, you see that in 2019, we were about 53% of all our publications had a CC BY license, and 47 had a more restricted CC BY NC or CC BY NC and D license. And now we are around 70% CC BY. So the transformative agreement helps making work more open. Then some more personal observations. So yes, you could say that the transformative agreement is an effective instrument to support authors in publishing open access, compliant open access. But in the Netherlands, we use open access as a service. We have the transformative agreements. We have green open access as a service. We have our funding, local funding. So it also supports the current publishing behavior of authors. That's a strength, but you can also see it as a weakness. They stay with the preferred journals, the high impact journals. When we discuss deals with publishers and we look at journal portfolio, at this moment we don't see a big shift from hybrid to full OA within that portfolio. The biggest shift is that there are more and more full OA journals launched. And also, of course, there are journals transferred from one publisher to another. But hopefully, we see more and more also journals flipped in the current portfolio. Because we have open access as a service, including the transformative agreements, we also have a discussion about author behavior, how to encourage authors to also use other forms of publishing, their own journals, Diamond, subscribe to Open, etc. You could say at this moment authors are outside the equation. It's between the consortium and the publisher. If you want to let authors play a role, you should more and more incorporate open access, including your transformative agreements as part of open science. And that's also, we do that now in our open science program that goes towards 2030 and also incorporates, for example, a new recognition and reward systems so that authors also are more stimulated to go for other to choose other journals, other venues to publish in. So that's in broad my perspective of publication practices. Thank you.
Andreas, you are muted.
I always forget this. This is it's awful. Sorry for that. Our next speaker is Tatiana Sanchez, and she will talk about meaning of transformative agreements in the 21st century. The floor is yours, Tatiana.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I hope you are now seeing my screen. Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you and to give you a perspective of the point of view of higher education librarians regarding literacies for the future. So, I will address two essential topics: the relationship between digital transformations and reading, and how transversal skills, namely digital fluency and information literacy, become important in the current context. So, this means also that, I'm sorry. Let's look at the information libraries and reading in this first part. And for Roberto Igarza, reading maintains its essential role in social practices. It's more present than ever in more complex, diverse, and ubiquitous ways. And so in the fast-paced context of digital transformation, new tools for discovering information are emerging. Student-centered teaching encourages libraries to explore more and different strategies for teaching information literacy, and at the same time it's necessary to diversify skills and take advantage of the several practices of ledger reading and view them as an opportunity. This relationship between people and cultural media ecosystems invites us to rethink cultural ecology in terms of participation, appropriation, production, circulation, and consumption of information. And so we become and support different actors, and all are part of this new ecosystem, such as publishers and press and recipients themselves count, because we are all now providing information. So for librarians, particularly for higher education librarians, it's important to ask how to develop new reading practice, how to build communities, how to gain visibility to potential audiences. And we know that readers' digital fluency and information literacy will connect, and we have to keeping the text flowing has become a priority, not only in terms of representation, but also in the way it's broken down and appears more hypertextuality. So authority, creativity, dissonant voices, this all reconfigures the scenario with unpredictable forms of participation and codes shaped by different platforms. And in these contexts, information becomes more abstract, and the focus is on experience management and on the subject's relationship with the texts and contextualized practice. So, however, it's increasingly difficult to separate social or cultural practice from technological phenomena. So how to optimize browsing and reading in the digital environment? We think is by improving digital fluency. And so we have here responsibility, to enhance this end, it becomes clear that an active involvement of librarians is needed to enhance critical thinking, to evaluate sources of information, to check facts, to promote observation and in a creative and conscious way. And well, to underpin all this support for teaching and learning. So once I have limited time, I will move forward and I will not talk about the changes in reading habits and opportunities to promote culture and reading in libraries of higher education, but I will talk about these approaches that we have to think about higher education in an integral way. And this implies some inspiration in part of the librarians and cultural implication, but also the creating networks to the collections management in a broader sense. And for this, we have to promote and provide transversal skills to our teams. So this approach also includes to understand our mission, to engage in all the practices that we are working into, to create new knowledge, to participation, and to adopt a strategic vision. So in the current digital context, there is an increased concern with access to information, and this has become exponentially mediated by technologies. And several problems can emerge from restrictions on freedom to access to information, and due to the lack of knowledge that we deal with technologies and digital information sources. So it's important that we have conscience of this. What are we doing nowadays? Librarians are just supporting information skills, supporting information data and management, also providing all the means to open science movement, and we continue to make the digital context safer to provide scientific information. And we are doing also lots of activities and actions to promote digital and media literacy with quality criteria. But that is not enough. So how can we as librarians situate and prepare ourselves to nowadays contexts? Let's look on some international trends on future skills. We know that the increased and diversification of information to manage, the submersion in technologies that need to be mastered, spaces with new functions, and users' requests call for updating of their information literacy in the context of open science in expansion and transformative agreements. So this it requires new skills for the professionals. And so we must also have this in mind. The contract of the transformative agreement, it seeks to shift the contracted payment from a library or group of libraries to a publisher away from subscription-based reading and towards open access publishing. So these principles for transformative agreements typically include a number of components, that are related to transition from subscription-based reading to contractually based publishing. And this implies also higher educations that should invest significantly in the development and adaptation on their professional skills. So we know that better and updated skills will result in tangible benefits by reducing costs, the optimization of knowledge collection and information management, and this will increase user and student academic success. So we are all working on this. But how can we better understand this ecosystem we find ourselves in? I think we should study international trends to better position ourselves. So in 2005, the European Council on Information Associations delivered 5 types of skills that librarians had to address, including information, technology, communication management, and other knowledge skills. So this evolved, and some years ago, another study proposed to reflect on these characteristics. And in this work, approximately 200 job advertisements for the area were analyzed, and the employability requirements showed that were qualifications and skills that were required, and these were the most significant. Also in the list profiles that we have in 2018, the Joint Task Force presented this digital humanities and open digital librarian, big data, routing, website management, database building, etc. So we see a shift to these skills, these digital skills. And in 2019, also, we see that another domains were presented to future information professionals. I will not read it because we have a few times. Well, the World Economic Forum always addressed some skills to address social challenges and provide policies for country readiness in a broader way. So they provide several qualifications and skills capabilities to all professionals. But in synthesis, in librarians, according to these forward-looking and current documents, there are important skills areas for library and information science professionals. Technical and scientific knowledge.
How many slides do we have yet? I would like to have one round.
Three or 4. Okay, I will advance.
Yes.
So these are the main skills, and we underline that some authors has already stated that the mantra will concentrate in to find, filter, and connect. And the most desirable skills will be a combination of information, knowledge, and records management. So, merging some ideas of these international strategic documents, we see that attentive and more qualified professionals will have advantages for the institutions and users, and more investment means also greater expertise and competence, and this will necessarily improve our our response to all the demands. So what do we need to do? Keeping this in mind, the open science movement, as well as other informational contexts, demand an in-depth knowledge in information resources, terminology, methods, and professional practice in an updated way. And this also includes negotiation capabilities and advocacy skills to enhance the transformative agreements opportunities. How? In continuous training, in participating and cooperation networks, and in search of self-education. So these are some essential skills that are maintaining what we are doing. And in conclusion, we can state that greater expertise and professional competence are needed to better manage all these needed competences and skills and all the resources that are in our broad campus. So thank you very much. I'm sorry for the time. And if you have any questions, of course, I'm here to answer you.
Yeah, thank you. You give us a deep insight about the changing library tasks in the digitalized world, and this is obviously very important and interesting. And one aspect of this digital world is of course transformative agreements. I have a last question to all the speakers before. Are transformative agreements really more than just the change of the cost flow? Until now, we paid for reading. Now we will pay for publishing, but the publishers are the same, the researchers are the same, and the tendency to publish in very high-level ranked journals is the same as before. What did really change by these transformative agreements, except the fact that a number of articles and books are open now, but they are also more expensive than the word before. And this is one of the open access aims, that the costs for scholarly communication should be reduced. And I can't see this development actually. But maybe you have another view on that, but I'm not so optimistic about that. Perhaps you can answer. Just Raúl, perhaps you didn't ask any answer yet, so perhaps you might answer my question.
Okay, thank you, Andreas. Well, you know that this thing that Lampedusa brought, everything changes so that anything changes, more or less. Well, I don't think the current landscape will change a lot in the following years, unless we reflect upon different things that are outside this discussion of today. For instance, what's happening with underdeveloped countries? What happens with Latin America, some Asian countries? Can they actually pay for publishing the same way we are able to publish? What happens with the future economic crisis? So is really the price, is really the money we pay for publishing in open access, the threshold we need to overcome in order to be visible in science? So I am not really optimistic, not right now.
Arjan, what do you think about that?
Yes, so in the Netherlands, I think the strength of transformative agreements is to speed up a process of openness and also incorporate open access costs outside deals into a more managed and transparent system. At the same time, because it's a service, authors take it for granted and stay focused on their primary work. What's not bad, but also their behavior of their favorite journals. You see several institutes in the Netherlands who really discuss within their open science program also why are we so focused on high impact journals? Is it not more about societal impact, about other ways of recognition and rewarding. But you can't, I think, expect that that agreements change research behavior. That should be part of a broader program, and that's in the Netherlands, the Open Science program, where open access, fair data, citizen science, recognition and award, etc., is all combined. But you need to start somewhere. I mean, you can't first draw a perfect world and then say, and now there is some magic step and then we are there. So you have to move, and I think TAs are a part of that movement, but we don't need to, we should not think that that is the only thing that is needed.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Colleen, you are more optimistic about the
I am optimistic. Well, I can see the change. All I'm saying is I can just observe the change that I see today. And so I see openness occurring. And I think that a lot of, you know, this question about equity, if I might address that, I think that and right now paying for subscriptions is keeping up inequities, right? And so I think a first step by repurposing the money we pay for scholarly publishing, the money we invest in scholarly publishing into openness is already a first step to fight inequities. And then if I look at it even in more detailed examples, I can say that the deal agreements themselves in Germany, but generally transformative agreements, have been successful in, first of all, enabling authors at the institutions that have these agreements, all authors, to publish open access, not just those who might have grant funding, which is what is happening now, but authors also in the social sciences and humanities. So that's one leveling of disparities. Level the disparity around access to content is another positive step around equity. And the third that I think we should be aware of is that even in low and middle income countries, money is being transacted for subscription paywalls. We are naive if we think this is not happening. I mean, this is documented. And those countries are actually now looking at negotiating transformative agreements so that they as well can shift the money that's spent currently on big deal subscriptions, at least to enable open access publishing. So this is right now, this is our first good step in the right direction, and we've created direction of travel, and so I tend to be optimistic. Yes.
Okay, but it shouldn't be the last step, of course.
Of course not.
It is an environment of open science, and we have to acknowledge that there are big countries that don't do anything on this field, and they are more and more powerful in research. And this is quite clear. This is China and the United States. Mm-hmm. So Europe has a special position about that and is focusing on open science, open access, and we can hope that Europe will be the winner of this game. Otherwise, we are very poor loser. So, but you are optimistic, and be optimistic. I'm optimistic as well. Thank you very much for this nice discussion. Thank you very much for your nice talk.
I just want to tell a little, I totally agree with my colleagues, my panelists. So I just want to underline that there is no open science without information literacy and without digital fluency. So we have to continue to insist on our users, they being just students or they being researchers or teachers. So to them have to manage information and to write down and to recover information in a practical and fluent way. And I think this is important to connect the points, the dots. So that's all. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day, and hopefully we see you again in the next webinar about research data management. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.